In today's video, we're going to talk about wells and well water. I think a lot of people who might be checking out this video will be thinking about buying a house that has well water and they want to see whether or not that's a good idea. So I think for most people, it is a good idea. If it's the right house for you, I don't think well water is all that much to be concerned about, but you definitely want to make sure that you have a good well, and that's what this video is about. As you get into more rural areas, and sometimes even in highly populated areas, you're going to find more wells. In my area, about 20% of the houses have wells. So they're fairly common, right? And generally, they're not a big deal. 20% of the people can't be wrong, right? So the main message of this particular video is you want to make sure that it gets tested. And we're going to talk about what you need to test, how you need to get it tested, what you're looking for as the results of those tests, and who should be doing the testing. So does it cost a little bit of extra money to properly test a well? Yes, but this is your household water we're talking about, so you definitely want to do it. And if something is found that needs to be fixed, it's going to save you a lot of money down the road. So make sure that you're including in those purchase offers that you're going to test the well. So for those who haven't met me, I'm Matt Heisler. I am the broker owner of Vanderbilt Properties, and I have sold many homes with wells. So even though I'm not an attorney and a lender, I feel like I can help people make sure that they're being careful when buying wells, properties with wells on them. So why do some homes have wells? Well, usually it's because they can't quite figure out how to get the city or town water to that particular location. Sometimes they couldn't get the city or well water to that location, and now they could, and then you have an opportunity to hook up. But just because you have an opportunity to hook up doesn't mean it's going to be cheap, right? So that's something that you want to price out if that's your plan to hook up. So a lot of times people think that it's going to be like $2,000 and it's like $25,000 or $35,000. So running pipes from the street all the way up to your house, not a cheap thing to do. They got to bring out heavy equipment. They got to put it below the frost line. It's expensive. So don't think that it's going to be cheap, and don't let someone tell you that hooking up is your solution in case the well's not working. So most of the time, wells are in place because installing a well was cheaper than hooking up to the nearest water line. That may still be true today. First thing that anyone who does a well test that you can do as part of your home inspection test for a property, which you should definitely do, should definitely have a home inspection, and you should definitely have a well test. I will tell you, I have a reminder at the end of this video, most home inspectors do not specialize in wells. They usually encourage you to get an outside expert to do them. When they do test wells, sometimes they only do a limited test, so you want to make sure that they're going to test all the things we're going to talk about in this video. But a specialist, someone who installs wells and tests wells, they're going to examine the pressure tank, they're going to examine the plumbing setup, and they're also probably going to try to do what they can to check out, make sure that your pump is okay. So best way to do that is we do a pressure test that tests both the pump and it makes sure that the aquifer is flowing freely and filling up the well at a certain rate. These pressure tests are really exhaustive. They really push the well. They use a lot more water than a household would typically use in a day. They use hundreds and hundreds of gallons, and they make sure that it's coming out at a particular speed. So it's a very serious test, and the well probably has not been under this kind of, pardon the pun, pressure for a long time because a typical homeowner won't do that. This is the kind of pressure you'd put on it if you had like a 2-acre lot and you were watering it with well water, which, big benefit of well water is generally free. So once you've paid for the equipment and the setup, there's no water bill. It's a real big advantage for why well water can make sense for your particular needs. Things that you do need to know is that if the pump isn't good, some wells are only 75 feet deep or 100 feet deep. It's not too expensive to replace the pump there, but some wells are 300 feet deep, 400, even 500 feet deep. Those pumps have to be a lot stronger, a lot bigger. They have much bigger cables that they have to run down to them. And ultimately, those pump replacements can be very expensive. So you really sort of want to know how deep that well is, how old the pump is, although that information is usually very hard to get, and then make sure that you have some idea of what that might cost when it's time to replace the pump. If there are softeners in place and other kinds of water filters, usually a good well tech will go at least over them, make sure that you understand them, what kind of maintenance might be required with them. Softeners are pretty common to see. in this area because Massachusetts has very hard water, but by no means guaranteed. A lot of people have no filters and no softeners, and that's probably the base case. That's normally what you see when you go into houses with well water in Massachusetts. I will tell you that well equipment lasts a very long time. A lot of times, most of the stuff, the pumps and the pressure tanks, they're all rated for 10 years or more, and they don't require a lot of maintenance, unlike, maybe a boiler or heating equipment or any of that kind of stuff. So it's not uncommon to see that nobody has done anything with this equipment for a very long time. Sometimes it looks like it hasn't been touched in a couple of decades. And that's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but it does mean that you want to make sure that you're looking to make sure nothing is just about to break. You want to make sure that you've done as much of a due diligence to make sure that the setup is okay. So again, equipment can cost a lot of money to replace. You want to make sure that you've given it as rigorous a test as you can before buying that house. But the second thing we want to check is we want to make sure that the water is potable. Potable is a fancy water word, fancy real estate word to mean safe to drink. For me, making sure that the water is safe to drink involves basically testing for arsenic, which is naturally occurring. It's not, it can just be there. And but you don't want to make sure you're not drinking it because arsenic and people don't mix, right? It's dangerous. You also want to check for radon. Massachusetts has a standard for radon that I think personally is probably a little low. But people can have lots of different opinions about that. There is no national standard for radon in water. It's all set by states, and you'll see that there's a lot of variance state by state. This is something they're still trying to figure out. But in Massachusetts, if there's radon in your well water, we can usually get the seller to fix it. Same with arsenic. Now, these systems are not inexpensive. $6,000 is pretty much a go and run rate for each one of those. So if you had a well that had arsenic and radon, that's a $12,000 fix there. It's not the same equipment. So those things you want to make sure someone else is doing and you're not doing, right? That's why we're having this video. But the most common problem that we run into is that there's bacteria in the well. And you don't want to be drinking that water. And you might say, well, how come the sellers don't get sick if there's bacteria in the well? And the answer is, well, they did when they first started drinking it, but their bodies have gotten used to it and they don't even notice it anymore. That's the typical case, and it happens quite a lot. But you're not used to it, so we want to make sure that there's no bacteria in your well. The good news is that is a really easy fix, and it's inexpensive, and any well guy can do it in a couple of hours. So that's not really something we worry about, but it's definitely something we want to test for. There's also organic compounds. Right now, not everyone tests for organic compounds. It's a good idea to do it just as a fail-safe, but truthfully, in most of my area, there are not a ton of places where it's likely that the aquifer has organic compounds in them. Organic compounds are usually where people that had factories from a long time ago and were dumping chemicals into the ground, some of them may have leaked into the aquifer. That's not common in my area, but it could be common in your area. So depending on how common that is, you want to make sure that you're checking or not checking for those kinds of things. They do lots of other tests on well water when you submit it to a lab. Those tests are inexpensive, so they just sort of include them as freebies. I'm not going to go over all of them here. They're not usually things that we fix, that's why. And it doesn't make your water any less potable, drinkable. So, but without a doubt, when buying a house, you want to make sure that you've got clean, safe water for drinking, cooking, showering, and pools. So this is the way that you check that, right? So you make sure the equipment's good, you make sure that the water's safe, and now you're good to go. In fact, you're going to have some of the cleanest water you can get. I will say as I close out this video that all well setups are different. This has been intended to cover the vast majority of things that you need to think about and talk about when buying a house with a well, but there can be others, right? So there are other situations where you might want to have a more in-depth discussion about your well. If you do have questions and I can answer them, feel free to reach out in the video. I'll do my best. But a lot of times you need to be on site in order to sort of figure out what the setup is. Again, as I have down on here, make sure that you're not just relying on your home inspector. And if the home inspector says, yeah, don't worry about it, I'll go over the well, ask him, is he going to do a pressure test? Is he going to do a potability test? A lot of home inspectors in this area anyway, they'll do one or the other, and some of them will do none at all. So you definitely want to make sure that that's going to happen. And that's simply because doing that test before you move in can save you thousands and thousands of dollars. Most of the time we do these tests, nothing comes up. But then you know the water is safe and the equipment is good. And I will tell you, it is worth the peace of mind just to know that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like to see more home ownership videos, feel free to subscribe and I'll try to keep them coming.